Hi, everybody. Welcome to our impromptu live. We didn't have one on Tuesday because I messed up. So we're making up for it because we won't be having one this week as I'm out of town. So this one is about a question that we received, and we thought, let's go ahead and handle this. So the overall session is called Getting My Arms Around Who I Am Being. And the question that was asked came in from a viewer. And it starts out, how do I make the shift in consciousness from a seeming human self to the identity of being? And Betty always, makes reference. You ask starting the question with, who am I being? So Betty, when you say to ask, who am I being? What are you really talking about there?
Well, it's really fairly simple, Quite often in everyday living, we are aware of being difficult. We're aware of being a brat. We're aware of being the life of the party. We're aware of a lot of ways to be. And most of them deal with our identity as far as it goes. If I'm being Betty, there are a lot of things that I get into as Betty. But then as I studied science, I found out that this divinity that shapes our ends that we've talked about, this divine presence that is having us show up in the form that we can clearly understand, that being is a little different presence than I'm being a grocery shopper, I'm being a mother, I'm being a school teacher, I'm being a real estate agent, all those things. Well, who am I being when things look a little difficult, when things look like a challenge? And a lot of the time, it takes me a moment to say, who are you being? You're being Betty with a problem. Okay, let's let that stand over there in the corner for a minute and think who you could be that would be problem-free. Who could that be? And so then I go back to definitions of man. Mrs. Eddy said man is the expression of God's being. She also says man is the, how does she say, conscious infinitude of being. I'm thinking, what is the conscious infinitude of being? And so I looked up the word infinity, and I found out that I can't be somebody stuck in a rut. I can't be from one instant to the next, the same old, same old. That's all Betty stuff. But who is the I that I am being? And I recognize that that's got to be the reflective presence of a God idea. And I have no way to predict how that should look or what it might mean, but it makes a difference. And the only way I know that is having lived it for a while, over many periods of time. I found out that it made a difference. It provided freedom from the trap of constantly believing that I'm Betty. And so it became important to me to take a minute to say, who are you being, Betty? And then I realized that really what's happening is, who am I being, period. And sometimes it looks like Betty.
Right. So when you say, who am I being? So you're saying, what's your reference point for the source of who you are?
What's my conscious awareness?
Right.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
so if
exactly.
So one access point for me, if I'm looking at, well, who am I being? I'm being Kim with an opinion and a judgment. And usually I'm going to be right about something. I've got myself going on about something, right?
Or I'm wrong about something.
Right. And then,
or I'm upset about something.
Right. But when I can let that all alone, when I can get myself back to what you've always called that 0 point, now there's freedom present. Yep. Freedom, I would also say there's possibility present. I'm not locked into my judgment, my opinion, my being right. my view that I have of the world and whatever the opinion about all that is, I'm free of that in that moment. And it is a moment by moment thing. So it is not an intellectual exercise, because that was one of the questions. Surely it's more than positive thinking? Yeah, it's not positive thinking, because then you're just trying to talk yourself into something without dealing with the fact that you've got a judgment, an opinion. You're upset because you had some expectation that, some change that happened that you don't particularly care
Take
for.
a deep breath for a second. Let
Yeah.
me just interrupt that for a minute. It isn't that you don't have those things, but they're all Kim things.
Right. Exactly.
They aren't going anywhere. They're just Kim things.
Yeah.
But who am I?
Right.
And if you look in the textbook, for instance, Mrs. Eddy has a definition for I and for I am.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all the God idea.
Right.
And that's the only I that matters.
Right.
The rest of it's a make-believe. Betty
Right.
is a Betty and a Kim is a Kim, and all that stuff doesn't go anywhere. It's just a Kim thing. But
Yep.
who am I being when a problem arises that I really need to pay attention to myself?
Right. So making the shift in consciousness from a seeming human self to the identity of being is just an acknowledgement of the fact of who you are. That's it. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
And
go ahead.
I would say that sometimes, when I'm really hooked into something, sometimes that's like calling mom as practitioner, basically, and saying, here's, darn it. And she just listens and then says, and who are you? Who are you being? Is that what's really going on? And I can take a look. I can quiet all of that stuff and take a look. And so that would be the, how do I make a shift? It's like the other way that I've heard it put is you can go east and you can continuously go east. But if you just turn around, you're as far east as you can ever be. And it's not difficult. It's not positive thinking. It's not an intellectual exercise. It is acknowledgement.
It's not trying to fix the human picture.
Right.
It's not trying to fix Kim. It's not trying to fix Betty.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with what's actually present, having it all occur.
Mm-hmm.
Way, way beyond being Betty or Kim,
right.
or Henry or John or Mary or Amy or anybody else. It's the presence that is whole, grounded in perfection, and never missing. What's missing is the attention, the acknowledgement of what's actually present that has Betty around in the first place.
Right.
So it is not an exercise in what to do with my daily activity. It is not to do with how can I fix Betty so she'll behave better, or she'll be better at this, or free of sickness, or whatever.
Right.
It's not anything to do with that. It's a matter of leaving that basis of belief alone. Just leave it alone and take a look at what's actually present that has you consciously aware. And one of the definitions of Christian Science is in the glossary under the word alliance. And it says science is the, oh dear, help me remember that one. It's the discernment of the spiritual idea of whatever confronts you. So I want to be discerning the spiritual fact that's present, looking like Betty or Kim or the house or the dog or anything else. Without that presence, there wouldn't even be a picture called Betty. That presence is the source. And in Mrs. Eddy's textbook, she says that mind is the source and condition of all existence. Right. And she's not talking about brain activity. She's talking about a universal intelligence that is labeled mind. And she capitalizes it with an M so you don't get confused with the human belief of mind.
Right.
But there is actually an intelligence functioning universally, independent of Betty and the Kim and the look of things, and yet allowing that look to occur because it is the convenient language for each one of us to know that we consciously exist.
Right.
I know that I consciously am, otherwise there wouldn't be any Betty around. But what is that? Is it the thing I'm looking at in the mirror? No, nothing to do with that. If I try to fix it a million years, is that going to do anything? No, it's just going to be a bunch of fixes. Some miss and some hit.
Right.
Random.
Right.
So it's a matter of leaving that basis of belief alone
Mm-hmm.
and just for a moment acknowledging the spiritual fact of being.
Yes.
And it's your own being
Right.
that you're acknowledging. And that's what squares things away for you, not anything magic at all.
Right. So when we talk about acknowledgement, when we talk about, and is there anything that plays into it around willingness to allow the picture to just be the picture without getting all embroiled in it?
Yeah, because your devotion to the picture, your attachment to it, is the roadblock between you and freedom.
Okay.
If you can't put that in the chair in the corner and leave it alone, you're going to have a struggle. So it's a matter of leaving that basis of belief alone. Nothing's going to happen to it. It's just going to sit in the chair.
Right.
But whatever the picture or the description is that allows you to leave that alone and just be present
Mm-hmm.
to existing. You know, it's like the ether. It's like the air you breathe or something. It's the space in which you exist. It's consciousness, conscious awareness. In the definition I gave you before, the conscious infinitude of being. That's actually what's present that allows Betty to show up.
Mm-hmm.
But Betty doesn't have the tools to work with. Betty is just the way it looks. It tells me, yep, you're present. On we go. What
Right.
that presence is very different from the look I get when I look around me and think, oh, well, that's stuck in the mud.
Right. You know, part of what I'm hearing is, you know, and part of what resonates is that I can acknowledge being. I can have all of my stuff about the picture going on. If I can let that alone, almost like a thank you for sharing.
Yep.
Like when I hear all of my judgments and opinions and thoughts and blah, 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 I can just say, hey, thank you for sharing. And now I know there's only perfection functioning, and why it has to look this way, I got no idea, but on we go.
But so what?
Right. On
What
we go.
difference does it make?
Right. And it's that conscious, and that's the acknowledgement right there. That's the turning around from heading east.
Yep.
That's the just flipping it and just saying, okay. And then it's usually, you know, I go on, but I have freedom in a whole new way when I'm able to do that.
Yep.
And the picture may stay the picture. It doesn't mean the picture resolves anything.
But you will not be a victim.
That's right. But I'm no longer dependent on the picture having to change.
Right. You clear that you're free of that. That's just the way things look. And you don't know why they look, and you really don't care.
Yeah. On you go.
No.
So that's pretty much it.
Margaret even mentioned one time, Mrs. Eddy said, and she quoted something. She says, now, I don't know why she said that, but she says, I don't care.
Right.
Why would I care what somebody said something about? And that was a real wake-up call for me when I heard her say that, because I got that we think because she was a teacher and a science practitioner and on and on and on, that what she said must be important. But no, it's not what she said that's important. It's who I'm being. And when I think I hear something, that's up to me. That isn't attached to her or anybody else. I have to be myself. And that's a capital S, big self, the divine being that's present all the time, whole, perfect, complete. It's
Yeah.
always present, never misses a mark at all.
Right.
It just right there saying, anytime you get around to it, here I am.
Right.
Here I am. So we misuse that word I, and we believe that this is important. And this is fun. I have no complaints about that. But I do know that when I pay attention to who I'm being, there's no upset. There's no blame. There's no argument. There's no friction. What there is peace and joy and power.
Right.
Because being is one conscious infinitude of perfection.
Right. Yeah. So at any rate, that's pretty much what we wanted to talk about. And that is the little bit to answer that question. And I hope this makes a difference for you. Please leave a comment, more question if you have more questions about this.
I want to talk about one other thing, because I had another inquiry too. I have a friend here sent an inquiry in asking about her, what does she call it? Compulsion, I guess I'd call it. She says, I just have to go to church every Sunday. I've been doing it all my life. It's really a way of behaving that I feel badly if I don't go. But she says, I don't get anything out of going to church. And what's missing in that inquiry is the view, the opening that would allow her to see that you don't have anything ever in your human living give you anything. Never. Everything is out from existence, out from exists, out from is. It's not ever attached to your view. Your language view is the discernible form in which you move along, being all that you can be. When a problem comes up, when you can leave that form alone and go to church and enjoy the hats, go to church and meet people for lunch, have it be a social event. I got to thinking about it, and I thought, I haven't been to church for years, but I remember the many times I went because it was so much fun to go to lunch with my friends after church. I still go to lunch with a lot of them. I just don't go to church anymore. But never is any human activity giving you anything. You are growing your human activities out of who you're being, consciously or unconsciously.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them are wake-up calls.
Right.
They're called problems. They aren't problems at all. They're just something that looks that way.
Right.
But it wakes you up and you say, wait a minute, I don't like that too well. And it makes you function a little bit differently with a little more discrimination. So always enjoy everything that you're doing with the awareness that it has nothing to do with getting anything. Mm-hmm. It has everything to do with loving being. So you go or you don't go. It makes no difference.
Right.
And you take the opportunity to be free. Mm-hmm. Not driven by a compulsion or an obligation, or because somebody else is going to say so and so about it, but because it's fun to do it. Life is fun, fundamental.
Okay. All right. So that's about all we've got for today, but we wanted to address it. Have a great week. Watch the rest of the videos. We'll see you a week from Tuesday on the 29th, I believe, or the 28th. It's the 28th or anyways, I think it's the 28th of March. So we'll be back then. And until then, have a great week. Hope this makes a difference. Leave us comments and all of that. And we will see you then.